So we drive, and I don't remember, but I guess I fell out. My dad took a turn, fell out head first, and fractured my skull.
Yeah, suffered a brain bleed down into his brain stem. He was moments away from brain death. They had to life flight him to a hospital that was 6 hours away driving. They got him in surgery pretty immediate, had to remove half of his head like a puzzle piece and popped it right off, and saved his life. He was in a coma for 16 days. He was on life support for about 11 and came out a miracle.
Welcome into the ROCC Pod, produced for the Royal Oak, Michigan Chamber of Commerce. I am John Gay from Jagged Detroit Podcasts.
I am Lisa Bibby, your realtor with Century 21 Northland.
All right, I have to tell you, I first met Bryce Sherman back in February at a Chamber Coffee. I wanted to say it was the Detroit School of Rock and Pop. And after hearing his story of going from a traumatic brain injury to passing all of his tests, becoming a financial advisor, I knew we had to have him and his partner, Shayna, on the show. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Well, I cannot wait to hear this incredible story. But before we do, how did both of you guys meet?
We actually met because we worked together. We both worked at a car dealership. He was the service writer. I was the receptionist. I thought he was a nerd. And here we are 10 years later with a beautiful baby and married and, the whole shebang. So
Nerds are the best kept secret.
Really are, though.
You're all speaking my language at this point. But you're not from Michigan originally. Where were you grew up and where'd you meet?
We both were born and raised in San Diego, California, and we met at the Honda dealership in El Cajon, California.
What brought you guys here to Michigan?
Actually, it's crazy to think about. We had started in business and we were actually working for an office in Rochester Hills, even being in California. So, with COVID going remote, you can work from anywhere. And we just met the most amazing people throughout our business, throughout our times together. And there were two major things that happened in our life since we'd been in business. Our son was born and he had a pretty crazy injury. And the community that rallied around us was in Michigan. So we said, if we're going to come out of this, we're going to come out strong. We're going to build something big together. We need to surround ourselves with the right people. So we did the crazy thing of completely relocating so that we could be around those people.
So tell us about the accident and what happened, because you told me this story in person, Bryce, and it's an incredible story.
Yeah, so our son was born August 18th of 2022, and the accident happened July 1st, 2023.
Wow.
So he was just under a year old when the accident occurred, and we were going to the state of Colorado to visit my father's side of the family. We get out there and there's a little swimming pond about 300 yards from the house. We decided to go down and go swimming for the day. We go down, we go swimming, and my grandfather and his wife decided to go home and start the barbecue and get ready for our evening meal. So they leave in one of the three vehicles that showed up. The only other two vehicles are my dad and my Aunt Brittany's car. My dad's truck, he's a construction worker, so the entire inside of his truck is just tools. So the only other option to sit was on the toolbox in the bed of his truck. So my uncle and I sat on the toolbox. Now, mind you, it was only 300 yards. It wasn't very far. So we drive, and I don't remember, but I guess I fell out. My dad took a turn, fell out head first, and fractured my skull.
Yeah, suffered a brain bleed down into his brain stem. He was moments away from brain death. They had to life flight him to a hospital that was 6 hours away driving. They got him in surgery pretty immediate, had to remove half of his head like a puzzle piece and popped it right off, and saved his life. He was in a coma for 16 days. He was on life support for about 11 and came out a miracle. Here he is. And it just It's crazy. Said he would never walk again, said that he might be paralyzed on his whole left side of his body. There's some deficits, but definitely not paralysis.
So curious for you in undergoing such a traumatic event, what was it that carried you through? And while all these doctors are telling you, you can't do this and you can't do that, what empowered you to just say, you know what, I can, despite what everybody's telling me, and actually make this happen?
That's a really good question. And the only thing that I had to remind myself every day was to be better than I was the day before.
Yeah.
Because
I love
had
that.
to live for both my wife and my son.
Mm-hmm.
Like my son being like 4 or 5 and playing catch with him. And if I couldn't do that, then like what kind of growing up would he have?
Well, I think that's a really important message for everyone. And I've heard it along the lines of be 1% better. Like we're not striving to meet our end goal and that big dream. Just how can you make today 1% better than it was yesterday? And if we all live by that, no matter what you're undertaking or where you're at in your life, you have the ability to surpass. And look where you've come in just a short time. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I have to ask Shayna, because Lisa and I have talked about anxiety, mental health so much on this podcast already. I can't imagine you've got a less than 1-year-old. You're not home. You're in Colorado. You're not in California, or you haven't yet moved to Michigan. And as the spouse and the mother of the child going through this, I can't imagine the toll this must have taken on you.
Yeah, it was, there's something to be said about just not having a choice. I had to. What was the choice? For me to give up on my family? That wasn't going to be an option. These boys are my whole life. So what started as a little vacation, but it might have been the most important thing that has happened in our life because it made so many things come together. It made us have faith. It made us stronger as a couple, as parents. I mean, when we were in Colorado, we didn't know how long we were going to be there. It could have been a couple of weeks. It could have been a couple of months. It could have been a couple of years. We didn't know. I also didn't care. And so when he was getting transferred to a rehab hospital and I said, we might be there a while. Who cares about what we have in California? That's not important. I flew back for a weekend. I packed up our home. I actually put it in storage during all of that. And I said, it doesn't matter where we go as long as we have each other. Our son's never going to remember those times. He's going to remember how strong mommy and daddy are. So.
Wow. So you talked about the community in Michigan really being supportive of you. I'm curious how you've transitioned from that recovery and that rehab to deciding to come to Michigan and then eventually go into business together.
We had always talked about leaving the state of California. That wasn't too much of a surprise for us. But to most people, when you ask what brought you to Michigan and you say, oh, the people I met through business, you're like, really? That's what brought you there? But it's just so much more than that. And we just couldn't deny our faith in a lot of different ways. So we just had to let that carry us to our next. And I mean, that's the biggest thing throughout all of this, faith in ourselves, faith in business, faith in God. You know, all of these things are just so important to us that we just can't deny it or run away from it. So we just follow.
Sometimes the messages are so loud and clear that it is just an obvious choice. It doesn't make sense, but it's an obvious choice of why you need to make a life change. So I'm glad you guys were able to see those signs. And I'm really grateful that Michigan opened its arms and welcomed you guys.
Yeah.
So did you guys always want to be a business owner?
No. You can probably take this one.
Okay. No, we didn't always want to be in business, but the thing is we never thought of the possibility of being a business owner. We always were taught you go to school, you get a good job, you clock in, clock out, get paid. Shayna was a paralegal before this, and I was a journeyman electrician. Like, we both had 2 pretty good jobs, but in San Diego, having 2 pretty good jobs, you still kind of live paycheck to paycheck.
Oh, yeah, that's an expensive part of the country.
So what made you guys decide to get into becoming a financial advisor?
We actually started in this business because we were clients before we were ever a part of the actual business and the transactions. We were about to have our son, and had this moment of, whoa, we should probably get our financial ducks in a row. We know nothing. So we started having that conversation. Things were becoming a little bit more important to us in that regard. And I needed to find a way to make some extra money. I was struggling, even working in a law firm. You don't think that could happen, but it did. And I said, I need to learn this stuff. If I'm struggling with this and these concepts, then people in my life are probably struggling with these concepts. And if I'm not going to teach them, who is? So I started getting my financial licenses. I fought to make my career switch. And, that came with a lot of belief change and things in myself. And then this guy joined alongside me a couple months later. And, the rest is history.
I love that because that's actually, you hit the nail on the head. It's not even that people don't understand necessarily a lot of this. They haven't heard about it. They don't have somebody teaching them this. So by you stepping into that role and actually sharing from a firsthand experience your knowledge of it, I love hearing about that because there's so many people that if they had been given this opportunity to learn about, becoming financially sound, they'd be able to take these because they're just steps. Mm-hmm. They're simple steps you put into play and set up your finances. But a lot of people haven't heard about them. So
I'm so glad that Michigan has recently passed a law to mandate financial education for students because I think about when I grew up, I picked up some bad financial habits from my folks based on what I grew up with. And it wasn't until I met my wife and she cracked the whip and whipped me into shape. And I say that lovingly.
We love her.
That I finally broke some of those habits as Bryce is pointing to Shayna. Bryce, those tests to become a financial advisor are not easy. You are coming off a traumatic brain injury. I can't imagine how challenging that must have been to get your licensing and pass everything.
Correct. I took the FINRA securities exam and I had to study 2 to 3 times harder than anyone else who got a passing score. And it was rough, but I got it done.
Congrats. What is the most important lesson that you've learned so far in your business?
That there are going to be high points and there are going to be low points, but you still got to have that faith and really keep that vision in front of you because that's the driving force, right? I think that's probably the biggest thing, right, is faith. And
I mean, just like any business in general, you have to have a reason why you are striving to push your business and get your business being successful. You need a reason why. That could be your spouse, that could be your child, that could be you need, more financial freedom, whatever the case is. There is always a why. And if you put that in front of you, then you will never let yourself fail.
I think it's absolutely astonishing. Like we grew up in a world where men were making all the financial decisions for hundreds of years. And literally in this conversation just a moment ago, John, you mentioned props to your wife cracking the whip. And then Shayna, you're the driving force that first got your license. And I know for me in my relationship, I'm really pushing to get multiple properties to generate that passive income. And I love just seeing now financial decisions are actually being suggested, brought up, and researched by women. I love that.
Amen to that. Okay, so the company is Sherman Financial Group. If I'm interested in working with you, give me the elevator pitch.
You don't have to say yes. We just do a free financial needs analysis. And if you feel like you could benefit from anything we talk about, then we would ask that you either become our client or refer us to people who could use what we do.
Okay, so you come in for the free financial consultation. What is your kind of basic philosophy with how you help folks manage their money?
We all have debt and bills and responsibilities that we pay for every single day, right? And generally, someone goes to work and they get an income, and that's the solution to those problems. Heaven forbid something happens to the breadwinner of a family and that income stops. What are you going to do?
And you've lived that.
What are you going to do? You need to have some kind of income replacement. So the way that we handle business is kind of a 3-step process, right? So with the family, sort out their debt, help them free that money up, start focusing on things that their families actually care about. And while we are working in that long-term direction, protecting that income in case, heaven forbid, something were to happen and they had that income abruptly stopped on them. So it's a pretty powerful kind of a story that we're painting when it comes to putting together this financial plan.
As people are building their wealth and you're helping guide them, buying a home as a first-time home buyer, that's one of the biggest assets that can build them a lot of equity. Mm-hmm. So I would love to work with, if you know anybody that is looking to purchase their first home, definitely, have them reach out. I love to have free consultations with them too. And that way they understand what that process looks like in getting their first home.
Absolutely.
All right. I think it's time to move to our fishbowl question of the day, where we ask you a totally random question. Lisa, would you pull our fishbowl question of the day?
Yeah, let's dig in here for a good one. All right, we're ready. If you could be remembered for one thing, what would it be?
And we'll ask you both to answer that individually.
Yes.
Okay. So for me, mine would have to be giving families the gift of generational wealth.
Love it.
That's so good. If I want to be remembered for one thing, it would probably be, I want to, actually, and you touched on this when you said women are starting to become more of a voice for money. I want to be that voice for other women too. It's showing them, hey, let's get up, let's talk loud, let's be there, let's do this. And I want other women to kind of know that I can be that for them and lead them.
I love it.
I'm so glad Lisa brought up that point a moment ago. It's crazy to think that 50 years ago, women couldn't even have credit cards. Mm-hmm. They've only had credit cards since the 1970s, which is just mind-blowing to me.
Mind-blowing.
And as somebody who works with a lot of financial advisors in my podcasting business, a lot of the stuff that you're talking about is just music to my ears, and just your philosophy with everything in general. So Shayna and Bryce Sherman, the Sherman Financial Group, if somebody listening wants to work with you when it comes to managing their money, website, phone number, best ways to reach you?
Yes, my phone number, 619-249-0167. Our website is livemore.net/Sherman Financial Group.
It was so great to have you guys on the show. Thank you so much. And all their contact information is going to be in the show notes. My name is Lisa Bibby, and I'm a realtor with Century 21 Northland. I put the real back in realtor. We want you to love where you live. Questions about buying or selling your home? Call my cell at 248-981-3610. My website is soldbylisab.com, and you can find me on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram at Sold by Lisa B. Let's connect.
So many great synergies of ways we can all work together, and that's the beauty of the Royal Oak Chamber. And I'm so glad to hear the two of you have found such a home here in Michigan. That's what we love hearing at the Royal Oak Chamber. My name is John Gay from Jag in Detroit Podcast. If you have any questions about podcasts or are interested in starting or improving a podcast, you can find me on social media at Jag in Detroit or on my website, jagindetroit.com. We want to thank you for listening to this episode of the ROCC Pod, produced for the Royal Oak, Michigan Chamber of Commerce. For more information about the Chamber, Chamber events, and how to get involved, you can go online to royaloakchamber.com. Thanks, everyone.